in the 1870s. It's a very old specimen, and I believe this is a new species. I have found new species in nature, in the wild, but I've also found new species in museums.
为什么奥谢教授在博物馆里也能发现新物种？将古老标本描述成新种都需要哪些工序？像他这样的纪录片主持人去野外会带什么设备？大家好，我是冬青。之前的2集我带各位拜访了英国最知名的2爬学家 Mark 奥谢，为大家讲述了他的传奇工作经历，并介绍了他的新书的中文版，包含世界600种蛇类的蛇类博物馆。但拍摄纪录片撰写书籍只是他工作的一部分。今天咱们换个场景，一起去他的大学实验室里看看他是怎么发现新物种的。奥谢教授工作的地方就是他当年的母校沃尔夫汉普顿大学。在获得了必要的许可后，他带上了满满一箱设备，带我们前往他的实验室。负责人需要我们先换上实验服，奥谢教授则在一旁开始布置拍摄台。今天他将带我们一起拍摄即将成为新物种的古老标本。
This is my locked specimen cupboard, and this is where I keep the most important specimens, ones that I'm working on, loans from museums all over the world. I've got specimens in here at the moment from the Museum of Comparative Zoology at Harvard University in the United States. I've got museums from the Natural History Museum in Paris, France. I've got a specimen here from the Australian Museum in Sydney, Australia, and a number of other international collections. And what we're going to look at today, 4 specimens from the Paris Museum and 1 specimen from the Australian Museum. Now this specimen was collected in about 1900 in what was then Papua or British New Guinea. It's now Papua New Guinea. It was collected, I think it might have been collected by a missionary. I'm trying to work out his history. And it was sent to the Australian Museum, and it was identified as a Stegonotus, which is a non-venomous snake in the Colubridae family. But when we got to look at it, we knew immediately that it wasn't a Stegonotus. It is a Toxicocalamus, which is an elapid. It's a venomous snake. And it's in a genus that I've done a great deal of work on. I've described 5 new species, and with colleagues resurrected 3 species from synonymy when they've been sunk into another species. And this is a very interesting specimen because its scale count characteristics suggest that it belongs to a species called Toxicocalamus longissimus. But my heart says it isn't. A German word, Gestalt, tells me this is not longissimus. It just doesn't look like it. So we're working on this. We're getting all the scale counts. Well, I've already done all of that. I've already done all the photography. And at the moment, we are looking at its DNA. And I've sent tissue samples to a colleague, and they are analysing its DNA, setting it against longissimus, which I think it won't be, and if it isn't, it's new. So that's the Toxicocalamus from the Australian Museum in Sydney. Another venomous snake that I work on in Papua New Guinea is called Micropechis ikahika, a small-eyed snake. It's a very, very attractive snake. It's got a grey head, small eyes. The body is yellow. And then if it's from Papua New Guinea, banded with reddish bands on the middle and posterior part of the body. If it's from the northwest of New Guinea, it's completely yellow all the way down. And if it's from Wago Island, it's totally black. But I'm familiar with all of those forms, and I've seen 350 specimens now. I've caught 100 myself. And when I was in the Paris Museum, they had this labelled as Micropechis, and I looked in the jar and I go, no, that's Stegonotus reticulatus. And then I took it out of the jar and I looked at it and I go, oh my God, it is Micropechis. It's just not Ikahika. This patterning is completely wrong, and I believe this is a new species of Micropechis, never before described. And this was collected in the 1870s by two French collectors who went to New Guinea in the days when you travelled around the world in wooden boats. It's a very old specimen. I've done all the scale counts and the photographs. I may do some more today. And I know it's a venomous, I know it's an elapid because of the scale counts on the head. And if you look in the mouth, there you can just see the fang in the fang sheath by my thumbnail. This is a very exciting specimen. And this just shows I have found new species in nature, in the wild, caught them. But I've also found new species in museums, species that have been in a museum for 150 years or 120 years with the wrong name. The people haven't realized what it really is. And the main difference between finding new species in nature and finding new species in museums is I have never caught malaria in a museum.
好，当他找到了需要破解身世的标本后，该如何让大家意识到它们的特点呢？首先就是要记录下它们的形态特征。所以接下来我们要和奥谢教授一起给这些标本拍个证件照。和给人拍不同啊，这些标本太过细小，因此需要特殊的长焦微距镜头和闪光灯拍摄。具体型号稍后我们会在他的家中揭秘。在调试好设备后，用一根粗细相仿的笔上的条形码来确定合焦距离，这样一根还没有筷子粗的舌头就留下证件照了。通过这种拍摄法，可以清晰地发现两个相似物种间的细微差异。比如，这是过去被归为同种的蛇类，但一个有双埋在皮肤下的眼睛，另一个的眼睛则完全退化了。这些照片将不仅代表这个物种成为它们的特征基准，更是下一步工序的基础。在实验室拍摄完后，我又跟随奥谢教授参加了为低年级学生准备的毕业生工作经验分享，学长学姐带回来了一线的工作经验给在读学生们参考，帮助大家确定自己的职业规划。随后在下午，我又去听了奥谢教授的课《世界蛇类分类》，一整节将近2个小时。坐在第一排，我仿佛回到了很小的时候听最喜欢的科目老师讲课的状态。但奥谢教授的课堂魅力却是我从未体验过的，因为他是真的能结合自己在世界各地和这些物种亲身接触的经历，带大家认识世界蛇类。能这么讲课的人，全世界可能都没几个。我不知道台下的学生有多少想为两爬奉献一生，但至少他们获得了一个能做出选择的机会，以及一个令我无比羡慕的学习条件。好，结束了和奥谢教授在大学的活动，我们现在要将这些照片带回家，在他的办公位前进行下一步操作，那就是绘制出这些标本的鳞片结构。
Let's go to Museum of Comparative Zoology at Harvard University. This paper is the one that I published in their bulletin, and this was when I described Toxicocalamus ernst mayeri. I've now transferred that to the desktop. It will appear in a minute. I always work with these images at the absolute maximum resolution. So I do resample 300 dpi, so that gives me an image which is 44 by 29 centimeters, right? I will now drag that onto the Cintiq here, right? I will turn off the lock so that it's no longer, I can actually work on it now. I'll take this pen, I will zoom in, there's the snout of the snake. What I want to use is that tool there, the lasso, and I can now start to do this. The odd thing is I'm removing the background, I'll probably put it back on black. now I can go out, get rid of the rest of the black. Right, okay, now I've done that. Now, the bottom layer is my image, the next layer is fully white, and then there's a transparent layer on top of that. And the next thing I will do is go to the top layer, which is transparent. Okay, right, so now I'm working in black. Again, I normally would take more time over it than I'm doing. I'm not going to save this, I'm just giving you an idea of what I'm doing. I find this very therapeutic. I find it quite relaxing. Sometimes, the Malthouse pub where we went last night, sometimes when I'm going down there on my own and I've got a drawing to do, I will set up there and I'll have a pint, and while I'm waiting for my meal to arrive, I'll do a drawing. And there it is. And you can see what I've done. Oh. Now that's really rough, because I would normally, look at this, this is horrible here. I would normally take a long time over doing this. But what I want to demonstrate now is, just suppose I've done the whole drawing. If I've done the whole drawing, I would have the scalation and the snake's head there for comparison. Just like that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I can imagine.
So this is how I do all the detailed photography for describing new species.
对于新物种的敏感性来源于野外的月食物数。那么接下来我们要看看它都用什么设备来拍摄标本和野生动物影像。
And this is for doing museum work. And I've got two Canon 7D Mark IIs in here that I use at the same time. That's just got a 60mm macro, and I use that for photographing the whole specimen. And I'll photograph it dorsally, and I'll photograph it ventrally. And when I do it ventrally, I try and make sure that none of the ventral scales or subcaudals are obscured, so that I can get the scale counts from the photographs later and save time when I'm working through a lot of specimens, because time is at a premium when I'm working in a museum, and I've only got so many days there, and I want to get the data from as many specimens as possible. And if I'm going to sit down and do all the ventral and subcaudal scale counts for every specimen while I'm there, I'll only get a third as many specimens done as I would by doing this. If I photograph the specimen and I make sure that when I photograph it none of the ventrals and subcaudals are obscured, I can then count the scales later from the photographs, how I do that. So that's what I use that camera for. And I'm using these macro twin light flash guns, because macro work you've got to illuminate it with flash, so I've got those. Now the other camera I use at the same time is another 7D Mark II, and this one has got a very special lens on that Canon make, Nikon don't make one. This is an MPE 65mm macro. Now this is what I use for very small snakes, for doing finite detail of the head scales. I can actually crank this lens out to 5 times life size. If I put a ×2 converter on, I can shoot at 10 times life size. I could fill the frame with 1mm. Now I never need to do that, but for the purposes of the lab work, I'm usually working at 1 to 2 to 3 times life size. And what I will want to do is I will set this up in a tripod with a display next to it, so that I'm using this to focus. Then I will take photographs of the dorsum of the head. Then I will take photographs of left and right sides of the head, and then I will photograph the ventral side of the head. So I have a series of 4 photos, and they are all taken on manual, not autofocus, which means that the lens, I'm not doing some closer than the others. They're all at exactly the same distance, and I'm turning the dead snake, the snake specimen round, and I get a series of photographs which I can then, and I'll just step over here, I can then use as the basis for that. This is what I'm ultimately aiming to achieve with this sort of photography. And the whole snake, ventral, this snake had actually been opened up prior to me finding it in the museum. But there's a dorsal photo and there's a ventral photo. And that's my specimens museum kit. This is my field kit. And in here I have got a Canon mirrorless R5 and a backup camera, which at the moment is a 90D. That's my backup in case I had a problem. And then I've got an array of different lenses here, macro lenses, wide angle lenses, and this is for photographing reptiles and amphibians in the field rather than in, that's my museum kit, this is my field kit. But both of them need a support kit, and this is all the extra stuff that I need to ship out when I'm working. That's a backdrop for when I'm doing my photography in the museums. Set of calipers, tripod, any loop batteries. They are really good. I just don't like the idea of disposable batteries anymore, because where are they being disposed of? I used to give them to villagers when they were running loose down on power and weren't good enough for my flash guns. I used to give them to villagers, and I started thinking, well, what do they do when they're no good? They just throw them in the creek. So I started thinking, no, it's not right to be using disposable batteries. So I have rechargeable batteries, which are expensive, but in the end they save you money because you're not having to buy new ones all the time. So, you know, and I've got, that's like my field kit, and I've got a spare display for my laptop in there. That's the case that I would send in the hold, and either of these are the right size to fit in the overhead, so they're actually carry-on bags. At the moment they're a little heavy, so you have to take some stuff out, but they are designed, these are designed to be carried on aircraft. And of course that's not all the gear. I've got more spare gear in that old Pelican case down there. I've got another 3 camera bodies up here, older camera bodies, which I generally use with my students. When I'm teaching them to do macro photography, I take my old camera bodies and they can have a play with those.
从和世界各地博物馆的联系到拍标本这种细节工作，担任教授的 Mark 奥谢都能给学生提供帮助。资源丰富的大牛导师形象在这几天的交流里变得愈发具象化了。毕竟能在课堂上就带你游历世界的导师可太罕见了。而行万里路的基础是读万卷书，奥谢教授在拍摄纪录片前从不打无准备的仗，他会花很长时间和团队研究了解目标物种、生态和文化。是大量的知识储备才成就了一部部影响世界的纪录片。这也是为什么你能在他的家中看到这座堪比顶级高校的2趴学图书馆。
Welcome to my library. When I moved into this house in the year 2000, my late brother, he sadly passed away in 2012, my late brother Nick, he was marvellous. Anything, he could build anything, worked on cars, built houses. So when I said, Nick, I need a library, he said, I'll build it for you. And he built me this Edwardian style library with the downlights and everything. And I thought, that's great, that'll last me forever. But I'm already filled it up, 24 years, and the library is already full, and I'm having to spill out into other rooms. But this area and my study next door are the centre of my universe, because I can settle down with just these 2 rooms and write all my books, my papers and so forth, prepare lectures and everything else, because of all the information that I have around. Well in excess of 4,000 books in here, mostly on herpetology, reptiles and amphibians, but there's also books on prehistoric animals, extinction and so forth, because I teach on that, and also on some invertebrates and fish, but a lot of those I move up to a room upstairs simply because there wasn't room in here. The bulk of the books in here are on reptiles and amphibians, but as I say, I have a lot of books. I love books. Books are the transference of knowledge down the generations. If you publish something in a book and the book survives long after you're gone, people can read it and learn your thoughts and your beliefs and your understandings. So it's essential that we conserve books. And I'm old enough to appreciate tangible hard copy books that you can actually feel and touch. I think that PDFs and ebooks, whilst they have their place when you're travelling, they have no soul. This is a tangible book. I can hold it. If it was old, a really old book, I've got books in here over 100 years old, you can smell the age on them, and that's history, and people long dead have handled those books. If I may use a misquote, a day without books is like a day without sunshine.
没有足够的阅读，走得再远也只是过客。现在由奥谢教授撰写的《蛇类博物馆》中文版正在火热销售中。这本数千人读过的蛇类宝典，你可以在我的评论区置顶和视频框下链接找到。手捧此书，你不仅可以认识来自世界各地的600种蛇类，还可以熟知奥谢教授在本集演示过的蛇类鳞片形态特征，以及这些物种间的分类关系、食性生态和人文故事。我相信这本书会是带你走进对两爬了解更进一步的基石。从7月25号起购买的前100位读者即可参与抽取90年代末的绝版签名明信片。正如开篇所说，全平台前100位只有5张名额，所以值得你现在入手。已经买过的读者还可以入手同系列9本的超绝自然博物馆套装。这里除了有能让你解锁数千个物种的主体书外，还有多达12册总价值超2000元的定制赠品，比如大开本的奥杜邦鸟类，还有作者亲签的西方博物学文化等等。这个超值套装是北大出版社专门为我的观众准备的，目前仅剩13份，且仅售这一次。这13位藏主还将有机会获得5张大号绝版签名明信片中的之一。这一箱的书到家，你也可以拥有自己的博物馆了。毕竟真正的探险在实现好奇心的路上，而这条路不止在野外，也在书房和实验室里。好，以上3集我们一起跟随奥谢教授走过了惊险的丛林与荒野，听他讲述了纪录片拍摄中的险象环生，又走进了实验室、教室和图书馆，全面了解了这位伟大两爬学家的研究和工作。他的故事不仅属于他自己，也属于所有热爱自然、热爱两栖爬行动物的人。那么他的故事给你带来了哪些启发呢？欢迎大家在评论区留下寄语或读后感，之后我会翻译转达给奥谢教授。本期点赞过万，我还会加更一期之前他通过线上视频回答的几位观众留言的问题。这些问题更专业也更有深度，也许他的答案会让你看到不一样的世界。我是冬青，别走开，我再给你开个小灶。
This is a dart poison frog, and its scientific name is Dendrobates leucomelus. Leuco means white, melus means black. You could see when these specimens arrived in the Paris Museum, when they were described 150 years ago, they were described as black and white. You see this frog in the wild,
black and yellow.
It's black and yellow.
Right.
Now, in preservative, the yellow pigment disappears, so you end up with the white bands. And that affects green animals too. Because if you've got an emerald tree boa in preservative, or a green tree monitor in preservative, it's not green, it's sort of blue to cyan. And again, that's because the green is a pigment that is a combination of yellow and blue. And if the yellow disappears, you're left with the blue cyan. And that's led to a number of things that are green in nature being called cyano so-and-so or azura so-and-so, meaning cyan-coloured or blue-coloured. So it can be misleading. And you can't change the name afterwards just because it's not accurate. I've got 5 specimens here, 5 snakes, and a total of 10 heads, which you think is not possible, but it is. because each of them has got two heads. It's just a freak of nature. You can have two-headed animals of any kind. It's called dicephalic, or like conjoined twins. Basically, in the egg, there was a double embryo, so it developed two front ends, but it only ever developed one hind end. And quite often, they are born or hatched dead. This one survived for some time, actually lived and fed, but unless they are in captivity, they normally get taken by predators. In captivity, it is possible to keep them alive and actually raise them to adults. But it's just a freak. It's not supposed to have two heads.